Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to this our last day of the week, Future Friday. Thank you very much for joining me. I am your dreaded DM, DBJ, and I am here with, of course, the brilliant people who are here all of the time, both spectators and moderators and everyone else interested in tabletop RPGs, and more specifically, those interested in telling stories using transhuman elements, high technology, and flashing forward into the future. But if you are only someone who is interested in our Future Friday series, we talk about a subject all week long, and that subject has been pandemics. Yeah. And in science fiction, pretty classic. Pandemics are a pretty classic thing to deal with. I don't know. When you're talking about pandemics, you're dealing with contagions and outbreaks and all kinds of things of that nature, both in literature and intellectual properties. So you have lots of examples. And of course, all week long, we talked about, zombie apocalypses and things of that nature. But I thought we could talk about not just the locations, but in a high-tech society, in a science fiction society, especially with in transhumanism, how would the population deal with, a pandemic that they may have very little control of? What would maybe the definition of what a pandemic is might change quite a bit. And then, of course, we got to talk about some really cool story beats that you can add into the game to have some challenges, throw some obstacles, and just basically have, in a tabletop RPG context, have a lot of hilarity. Lastly, this show is broadcast on three platforms, Twitch, YouTube, and the audio gets punched out to our own Discord server. Just pop over, join our Discord, and drop one down to the boiler room. That's where all the cool kids hang out. And let's dive on into it. Okay, so transhumanism essentially involves a number of things. Essentially, it is this concept that all of the sciences start to reach the peak at which our wish fulfillment becomes a reality in our own lifetime. And a lot of transhumanism, involves like cortical stacks and practical immortality and being able to switch, edit your own brain and switch and re-sleeve in the bodies, zip up into another body if you wish to, and exploring our own solar system, and maybe even expanding out to other galaxies and such, and living in different kinds of habitats. Now, Deadman, an absolute fan and font of information about Eclipse phase, says pandemics may be more focused on Eclipse phase as the exigent virus is central to the game. Yeah, as a matter of fact, for those who are unaware, one of the major tenets in Eclipse phase is that there was something known as the exigent virus, and a computer program known as the Titans, all capital letters, with I guess periods after each of those letters. And there was a war between humanity, and when humanity figured out that the Titans were basically ripping down society, that there was a big battle, and humanity fled to the stars, and Earth was destroyed in the aftermath. And it's a little vague on the details, specifically because game masters are allowed to come up with their own rationales and reasonings, but the Titans have left, but pockets of the exigent virus are still out there. One of the most adaptable viruses in science fiction, because there's something, for example, there's a version known as the basilisk hack, and that is literally you can stare at code and the code will invade your brain, and invade the technological aspects of your even biological body. And as a matter of fact, you could even make the claim that it can invade the basilisk hack happens because there's so much technology inside of you, like your cortical stacks and all the digital things and cybernetics and such of that nature. So it's very effective. So in a pandemic in a high tech science fiction context may not be limited to chest colds and headaches and sores on the body, right? It could be through high tech vectors, especially if there is something, if you relate it to something far more like nanotechnological or biotechnological, meaning it could focus on specific traits within the population. It could there could literally be a pandemic that invades technology, and what I mean by that is not just a computer virus, but something that affects the high tech plastics and alloys that are created because many of them are invaded with a lot of nanotechnology. So, a nanotech virus sounds like something that would perfectly fit into a transhumanist tabletop RPG. Yeah, Dead Man says Titans stood for Total Information Tactical Awareness Network. Gotta love the cool sounding acronyms because um, don't understand the forethought of not having a really cool acronym in a modern day context, but whatever. Maybe they just get lazy sometimes. But yeah, the insertion and deletion of high tech viruses, especially of course, in our modern era, in I guess since the 20s or something, when people were starting to get sick, everyone's like, oh, of course, somewhere out there in the world, they created this in a lab because it has some particular effect. Well, conspiracy theory or not, that you may or may not think of in transhumanism, that very well may not only be true, but might even be a commonality, as the corporations have you know dozens, hundreds, thousands of um, of habitats working on different air quotes illegal scientific discoveries. I say illegal because once you're with the fall of governments and you're out there on your own in the deepness of space, legalities start to fade quite a bit. Let's just say working with things that are morally reprehensible, and those things can get out. And we've got a plenty of examples of that. You could take just nearly any um, like what was a recent movie was known as Life as an example, right? Scientists or astronauts or colonists find a strange new life form, and then hilarity ensues as it kills them one by one. And who's to say that that's particularly alien? Maybe it's something that should have been kept under lock and key and wasn't. That the classic one of the classic tropes in science fiction, and used plenty of times in, say, a an eclipse phase setting, would be abandoned complex, starship, habitat, etc. PCs go there because of a distress call, and then they stumble upon whatever element or thing was released and whatnot. But I will contend to you that an equally great location to explore and to fend off this type of pandemic would be someplace crowded, a something that is released on a starship that is much like a giant, an intergalactic sized um, cruise ship, or a space elevator, or like I brought up earlier in the week, the zombie movie, The Train to Busan. In Train to Busan, there was a zombie outbreak on literally a train. Why not have that happen on one of those vacuum tube trains, traveling across the landscape of Mars or something, or any number of those things could happen. And in the Eclipse phase and Altered Carbon, one of the best things about those games is, guess what, Game Masters? Um, Based on how you do this, you can kill your characters off one by one pretty easily, and the game still continues. Death in those games is just it's a setback, not necessarily the end of a story. Now, of course, you might have to have access to those things, and I could imagine having some kind of fun with player characters running around maybe a habitat that's been closed off, because remember, there's lots of sensors, you're going to have lots of security, so you can very much do a horror bounded location. Horror storytelling works very well, extremely well, in a bounded location, a place where you have very few places to run and it's very difficult to leave, or something such as a security measure of a habitat around Jupiter where something gets released. PCs are on the ship. All signals out don't work unless the PCs, you know, uh, finagle their way through the ship, maybe to beam to get to a beaming station. And what's the other defense? The habitat pushes itself towards the planet out of geosynchronous orbit to fall into the gravity well, right? That could be a thing, and the player characters may need to fight against time to get out of the pandemic. And if they're in a crowded location, when people around them start to shift and change and become contagious, and their minds start to become infected, maybe like an AI style of pandemic, where one by one the non-player population all starts becoming like hive-minded, or there's some kind of biological mutation that starts to transform people, far beyond the zombie. Maybe they start growing limbs out of themselves, or chest bursting, or vomiting out other alien type of life forms that they themselves become. I don't know. Hell, their whole internal organs could spill out of their mouth. They're turned inside out or something, or the skin starts to slough off, or whatever. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, something pretty nasty, body horror style, and that in itself could be coming out. And the PCs need to fight against it. And of course, when you have a huge population center, that becomes the horror. Like, that means anybody here or everyone here might transform. How many people are in the station? And your muse, the little internal computer's like, 50,875 people are in attendance in this habitat. And the PCs are like, oh shoot. Yeah. Deadman puts in pops more information about the Titans and the Titan virus. The Total Information Tactical Awareness Network was a U.S. military project that involved tight collaboration between multiple advanced neural networks. Yes, Skynet, we know. It was the largest and strongest machine intelligence of its kind, having only one peer, the 100 Flowers system managed by China's Machine Intelligence Directorate, known as MIND. The Titan system played many roles: surveillance, threat analysis, forecasting, net war, and more. Though the Titans were specialized systems, not AGIs, and in theory shackled, they acquired the ability to self-upgrade. Yeah, that's always the problem. And they did so at an exponential rate. Perhaps they developed these capabilities on their own. Perhaps they had assistance. We will likely never know. What matters is that the hypercores failed to reach this goal first. Instead of a controlled and beneficial superintelligence, we have machine gods guided by their own obscured interests. And one of the great things about science fiction is that we there's something. I know you guys are fans out there, and there's something known as the paperclip optimizer, and it is a thought experiment and fear that, given enough processing power and a lack of a moral standard, an AI computer system designed to, say, make paperclips, and of course paperclips stand in for any number of actions, that it could destroy society because it doesn't understand the ramifications of what it's doing, even though its programming might seem quite a bit innocent, right? So a pandemic, a technological, there it is. Yep, Wikipedia, the paperclip maximizer. Thank you very much for that, Tesla. Yeah, the paperclip maximizer is this idea that a very innocent programming thing like, oh, protect humanity, or you know, build a place for the future, or please stop our enemies, or something very simple, right? Like, um, there are dangers out there, protect us, could enslave humanity when a computer system goes, oh, the best way to protect humanity, since they want me to protect them, is to encase them in stasis and put them on ice for 1,000 years, and build a shell around the world or something, right? That's the and a virus, a pandemic style virus that's spreading everywhere, could be the end result of a very simple AI doing its job and going, oh, you told me you wanted to bring life and justice and liberty and equality and a new state of being to humanity. I'm just trying to evolve humanity, and you're like, evolve us into like biological sludge. Like, well, I was just trying to forcibly hive mind everyone and place everyone into bliss. Why? What's wrong with that, right? I was just going to stick a cord in the back of your heads and put you into a artificial world of paradise on an eternal loop. What's your problem? And so, heck, an AI that presumes that humanity is a virus unto itself, and its desire to support life might be, oh, I'm going to have to knock everybody back to the Stone Age, because that's the most innocent, base form of life that I can think would be the optimization of their programming. Now, of course, a pandemic style virus doesn't necessarily, a pandemic style of anything doesn't need to be high tech. It could be something discovered from, like, through a Pandora gate or a distant world, like in the Altered Carbon setting. Humanity has spread to other galaxies, or other solar systems. I'm sorry. And who's to say somebody, some architect or archaeologist somewhere didn't uncover something that basically just can't be resisted, and it got out. Essentially, what people, virologists here, fear that there might be some kind of disease or virus or bacteria that we have yet to uncover, that through accident, we just uncover it again, and it's been underground for 10,000 years plus, or an asteroid comes into, falls into the atmosphere and is carrying upon it some kind of biological material, or our humanity's interaction with something alien. Both ourselves and the alien thing are mundane, but when combined together, create something that is can mutate, which really is a fear from even those in NASA here in the States. They've discussed that, if we go to an alien planet, our human bodies, internally and externally, we have a lot of living things, bacteria and heck, living critters that are in our hair and our skin and such. And if we bring something with us, that might be the danger that we fear when we get there. So you have a lot of vectors to create something like this. Now, a pandemic. Let's get to the definition of a pandemic. A pandemic basically is something, in our current context, that spreads around the planet Earth, right? It's not just limited to a particular nation or a region, a valley or a desert area or one island or a continent, but starts to spread beyond those borders. In science fiction, the fear is that it would spread not only on a planetary scale, but start jumping from habitat to habitat, planet to planet, so on and so forth. Something that is released on Luna that ends up getting to Mars and spreading there is a danger. And so the easiest thing is to cut off all communication, or cut off all physical transportation. And in Altered Carbon, there's you're known as digital human freight, DHFs, digital human freight, or cortical stack, or ego casting or needle casting, is when your mind is uploaded and beamed to another location. If the human, excuse me, if whatever your definition of humanity is, if the pandemic is able to get there by beaming through someone's mind to arrive somewhere else, um, physically keeping people out might not work, especially if, for example, you could have something very like a terrorist act that's very insidious, where the terrorists somehow encode their human brain with the blueprint to create a virus when they arrive, right? So so evil actors beam themselves to other planetary surfaces, other habitats. They arrive, their brain is downloaded, and guess what's in the back of their head? It's not a blueprint for jeans and a t-shirt. It's a blueprint to print off yet one of these hyper-viral diseases or something, or some kind of reprogram nanotech or whatever. And since they don't have to bring anything physically with them, they just have a blueprint for it, and they put the blueprint into the 3D printer, and the 3D printer breaks or something, or sends off an alarm, but it's too late now. Virus got out, and the evil actors have won, right? um, uh, because of having the ability to basically kill off your player characters and have them come back again. One other vector of like creating a lot of tension would be player characters' bodies, whether it's synthetic or biological or something in between, getting killed off. They could very well have those things happen to them, get killed, pop back into a location where they can find maybe a number of choices of bodies to get for them. For example, in a habitat on Mars, there may be limited bodies for the very rich and privileged. There may be morphs that you could sleeve into for maintenance. Of course, you're going to have security. They might have morphs there. Some of them might be corrupted or very difficult to get to, security lockdown and all that kind of stuff. But it might be kind of cool for the player characters to have to like run around to solve a thing, knowing that their body's like suffering from some kind of pandemic, the very flesh slouging off of bones, or synthetic body starting to get corrupted, and they may even have to destroy themselves for fear of, say, a computer virus taking over their body to get them to do a thing. And they're like walking with their firearms, like, the virus is taking me over. All right, guys, I'm beaming out of here. I'm going to have to re-sleeve, and then poof, they blow a hole in their own head or chest to just be beamed back to another location in the same habitat to have to start this race against time all over again. And that might be kind of a cool thing to do. Yes, I know the rules state that there's a particular time limit on re-sleeving, but if you're already hand waving it away in your own game, this might be a cool way to do it quite often. A perfect example of it was done in the first season of Altered Carbon, where Takashi's sister she's in a room where there are many copies of herself in chambers surrounding in the room, and every time she gets killed, she instantly reactivates yet another one of her bodies to come out with a katana. Naked katana fighting. That's all I have to say. I'm sure there are clips of it on YouTube somewhere. So solving the issue. Now, one great thing about horror sometimes is that sometimes you really don't need to explain everything. Like, meaning like as the game master, maybe you know what's going on, but you don't necessarily need to give this information to the players. And much like a zombie apocalypse, it's not a matter of stopping the zombie apocalypse. It's just a matter of surviving. So with a pandemic, you can include a lot of those things. Like, for example, characters are in a space elevator and they are right. Where's a good space? Let's go back to Mars, right? So they're in a space elevator leaving, leaving Mars Central, or maybe even descending down to Mars. And maybe it takes a couple of hours, or maybe even longer, based on how long the space elevator is. And this might be the beginning of the outbreak. The Again, one of the evil actors, right, a terrorist or something like that, is carrying the virus inside of them, either a technological virus or biological virus, is some kind of nanotech or something. And panic ensues as it's released, and the PCs are like, why is they're the space elevator is like a cruise ship done vertically instead of horizontally or something, and they can hear people screaming and yelling and things breaking and stuff, and the PCs are like, oh, we need to get to our weapons. Like, they're on level 17, we're on level 3, we're going to might have to go on the outside skin of this space elevator. And then of course security of the space elevator internally and externally is like, we're going to have to stop you, and the people on the ground are like, or up in space, like, we're going to cut the cord, and people inside are like, please don't do that, we want to live, don't cut the cord, don't drop us back down to the planet, or whatever the case might be, right? As more and more security parameters start breaking apart, I could imagine having a lot of fun with that. And again, bounded location, timer, maybe to prevent it from not only spreading outwards, but spreading around the location that they're in, the danger of being infected yourself. And mind you, the side effects can be anything. Yes, zombie apocalypses are the most common type of thing, but when it comes to high technology, who knows what kind of side effects there are, whether it's like, I don't know, spontaneous combustion, or like I said, the mutation of growing arms and limbs and chest bursting, and having your body shift or fall apart, or the inability to have your body act in a manner that you desire, as your arm starts trying to take your very arm starts taking advantage of the fact that you're asleep and tries to choke you out, or open up an airlock, or grab a weapon and start shooting your allies, and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to cut my own arm off, stick it out and just open up the airlock and stick my arm out into space, or get it cut off, or set it on fire, or put it in a machine press and cut it off before I re-sleeve into another body or something. Yeah, there's so many things. Yep, a rotivator. Yeah, thank you, Dead Man. You don't often see a lot of these mega structures in science fiction literature, but there are a rotovator is a type of other than a space elevator, is a type of device that allows you to basically get off the Earth, with very little energy. A rotovator, or a momentum exchange tether, is a kind of space tether that could theoretically be used as a launch system, or to change spacecraft orbits. Momentum exchange tethers create a controlled force on the end masses of the system due to the pseudo force known as centrifugal force. The easiest armchair way to describe a rotovator or a momentum exchange tether is to, much like a person taking a bucket of water and a rope and spinning it around, but imagine it's vertical, so that it spins down towards a planetary surface and spins back up into space, back down to the planetary surface, up into space. And because of its massive size, you can, as the rotovator spins, you can, we see this in amusement parks, where you have an amusement park ride that never stops, like a Ferris wheel or something. Yeah, like a Ferris wheel, especially the super large Ferris wheels. There's one the only one I can think of that I've been on is one located in Las Vegas, and it does not stop, right? The little orbs that you get inside of, you are able to walk up to it, get inside of it, and then it spins, and you are inside of the very, humongous Ferris wheel. But imagine the Ferris wheel done in the upper atmosphere, and that's basically a rotovator. And like Dead Man puts in, in a Discord, the rotovator on Venus in eclipse phase operates to allow people to get to the aerostats without need of the fuel of a shuttle launch. Yeah, skylifts essentially, right? So it spins down towards into the upper atmosphere of Venus and then spins back out to the airless part of the void of space. And then when it spins past the aerostats, you don't expend fuel. Now, of course, we do have rail launching is another way to get into and out of atmospheres. And when you're on a rotovator, the thing, like I said, it might take many hours in order to get to where you need to go. But if you're trapped, if the PCs are trapped in a place they're fighting off some kind of like pandemic style of like monstrosities, infecting a larger part of the population, and they need to solve it before they get to, the aerostat is spinning in deep space and they're about to go into the upper sulfuric acid gaseous atmosphere of Venus to an aerostat, and they know if it's released into the aerostat, everyone's dead. Then yeah, and yep, a chairlift works exactly the same way. They don't stop. It's designed so that while it's still moving, your momentum can catch up to it. Yep. A chairlift is an elevated passenger ropeway, or a chairlift is a type of aerial lift. Ooh, I said that terribly wrong. Which consists of a continuously circulating steel cable loop strung between two end terminals, and usually over intermittent towers, carrying a series of chairs. They are the primary on-hill transport at most ski lodges, I'm sure, or whatever it says after that. But that type of transportation writ large makes perfect sense for example, getting across let's say you have to go across you're on Mars, or heck, not even Mars. Let's say you're on Ceres or something like that. You're in the belt, and there's a number of asteroids that have been inhabited, and there's multiple crater cities. Okay, to get across the crater city, of course, we have things like maglev trains and all that kind of business, but maybe they use a chairlift mechanism where there's just a continuously moving loop, and you jump into the loop. Maybe it's only like human sized, right? So 1 to 4 people grab onto the loop and get dragged, carried across from one end of the crater to the other side. Whereas, yep, and like Dead Man says, and it goes on to say, it's on-hill transport at most ski areas, and but are also found at amusement parks, various tourist attractions, and increasingly in urban transport. And with the urban transport, you could have that stretch many, many miles, or at least have terminals in different locations. And I could imagine this being like essentially free transport to get people from one area to another. And in thin atmospheres, like a place like Mars, or zero atmosphere locations, maybe on the outer skin of a habitat or something like that, these things might move pretty damn quick once you catch up to it, much like the old style theory of having slide walks, basically a moving sidewalk that's often used in airports, but you have them, each slide walk you start stacking multiple slide walks next to each other, where each slide walk moves faster than the one next to it, so that you could possibly have people standing still with their luggage and things, but moving at incredibly high rates of speed based on the additional speeds attached to the slide walk as you catch up to the momentum, right? And again, that depending on the kind of transport you're talking about, that might spread things out there that you don't want them to be spread to. The Exergent or Titan virus gets out, and it's trying to security systems have shut down a lot of the network nodes, so there isn't what in Eclipse phase is called the mesh. Basically, there isn't one giant cloud system, as the security systems have shut everything down. So maybe the Titan virus has to insert itself into mechanical apparatuses and then run around to get to these closed off nodes, link into those nodes, download itself to do it, and maybe using these transport systems um, these transport systems are its way of getting from one place to another. And of course, you know me, I love using the environment and having like, having a running gun battle on the outside hull of a ship, or heck, having a running battle in one of these, like Deadman says, there are personal transport systems in many airports like that, where you stand on the slide walk, or the continuously moving maglev system, or they have, much like I can imagine a system like in Star Trek, where there's the turbo lift, where it's not just an elevator, it is a tube-like system that is programmed to take you as close to where you need to go in a three-dimensional environment. And so a turbo lift style of system with vac tubes that move up and down and vertically, or maybe there's a double hold habitat where the lift systems are designed so that they can take you horizontally and vertically to um, different axes in a three-dimensional habitat. So it can take you up, vertically across, through a tube, down into the middle, and then and settle you in these locations like a public transport system. And with alarms going off and security might be blocking some of those areas, so the PCs might need to break security to leave the confines of a quarantine, knowing that maybe they themselves might allow the quarantine to expand out beyond its own borders. And of course, the player characters are the professionals. So you can have a lot of people doing very dumb and very selfish or uh, very dramatic things that happen in a pandemic that may not align with what the player characters want. The example of like, oh, they're all infected, shut the doors so those people can't get here, and all the innocent people start banging against the doors, screaming like, "Let us out!" as whatever is in there starts taking over people more and more. Whether it's a zombie virus, something that hive minds everyone together and is completely violent and destroys their um, heck, it could be even something invading cortical stacks, and the PCs are like, "Ooh, we won't be able to re-sleeve. Damn it, our backup brains are corrupted. So we got one shot to do this, and if we die, we can't beam ourselves off. This is a suicide mission. Once this is over, we won't remember what we've done. Kind of thing. Um, it, I mean, those kind of stories I think are great. Now, um, a pandemic, like, how do you handle it? Now, it's not very fun for player characters to be sick, right? That's not a very fun role playing thing. It works good on paper, doesn't work good in practice. But again, the idea that you as a game master can kill them off, and if you give them enough, if you foreshadow enough elements for them to be able to re-sleeve into something else, is a good idea. Also, this might be the way to allow the player characters to interact with the game world in a different manner, to change things up. An example being that maybe biological life is infected, but so now the player characters need to re-sleeve into some used or utility service synthetic morphs. So this changes how they interact with the world, right? They're like, maybe that badass biologically enhanced Fury morph isn't available right now with all the combat modifications, but there sure is a very safe but clunky cleaning synth that sweeps up every now and again, tries to sweep up the fines that keep blowing around on Mars. And the PC is like, man, I wanted to be a badass, but I can't do that now. It's better to be in a synthetic body, so I'll get in a broken down synthetic body with, I don't know, a rusty patina on its surface or something like that. So that's another way of doing it. Also, with a time limit, with a pressure timer, you want to really, I highly encourage you to use some kind of pressure to get the players moving. Whether if they, for example, and I've said this oftentimes, uh, the PCs should be moving through your world, or the world should be moving into them or right through them. So if they're on a space elevator and they're just like, well, I don't care what's going on, uh, as it spreads through the space elevator, it should be quite obvious that things are getting worse and worse. Now, the bad part about player characters realizing that they can just put a bullet in their own head and then reconstitute somewhere else is time, energy, and resources, right? Yes, that might be a viable option, but no, that might not solve the problem, right? So if they are in the belt, but the closest location is a stealth ship that was given to them by a firewall agency, and that stealth ship is, I don't know, heck, a full AU away in measurement because they need to be far away, hidden behind the other side of the sun or something like that, then yeah, they could escape, but that doesn't solve the problem when the asteroid Sirius is taken over because the 200,000 people that live in there that are space miners, and it ends up becoming completely infested. Now, of course, you also have the nuke it from space option, right? Hey, let's just get out here and nuke it from space, but you might be destroying 200,000 lives and cortical stacks in your desire to do a thing. So, as a game master, be aware that your player characters are probably going to come up with the nuke it from space option, and that's where the scramble to get to the place where you can beam off because security has shut down communications, right? You can't, even with a neutrino signal in next to your cortical stack, maybe you can't beam off, or you have to find a particular location because your stealth craft is hiding as debris or something. They turned off the engines, they turned down their power, and it'll be back in orbit in 27 hours. So you're going to have to wait till then. Like, there are ways to get around those things, foreshadowing those elements ahead of time so you don't spring it on your player characters, right? You don't when the players are like, oh well, we'll just beam back up to the ship and nuke it, you're like, well, it's out of communication range because they decided to go into a controlled drift around the gravity well of Jupiter, and it's going to take 27 hours for them to come all the way back around, and before they start activating their engines or something, because they don't want to let the Jovians know where they're at or something. So messing with access to other resources and needing to jump through a lot of hoops to get there, putting obstacles in the way, I think is actually a good storytelling element. It's not really trying to nerf the characters. Another issue when it comes to using a pandemic is, of course, how do you stop the pandemic, right? And I mean, setting wise, not just coming up with a cure, which a possible cure could be if you're in a bounded location, you could spray something or create some kind of thing where you shut the human population that's been mind controlled or whatever gets shut down, and you put in an antiviral program that gets them back their humanity, or something that is sprayed into the air system that people can breathe in to cure themselves, or the typical everyone's going to have to sit down and get an injection in their arm, maybe the thing that helps stop the spread. But if it's something world destroying, something well far beyond the player character's abilities to control it, you might need to come up with a way to stop it, whether it means, heck, this could be the second apocalypse of humanity, the first one being when Earth got destroyed, the second one being the various habitats around the solar system are like in permanent quarantine, and absolutely positively no one is going out there. There are demilitarized zones, I think, on Mars in the Eclipse phase system, where they're like, nope, there's some kind of exogenous virus, something out there, and literally no one is allowed to go out there. Of course, this is where the PCs are going to go. In a high-tech virus, you could make this kind of thing the big bad, right? So it doesn't have to be mindless. It could actually be like a hive mind or alien consciousness, um, very a very Lovecraftian, intelligent, like um, very vocal, even thing that's taking over everything. It could be something that where once it becomes like a hive mind that starts infesting a population, and those population members that are infested start like teasing or talking to player characters or threatening them or something like that. And even as they start blowing people's heads off, the conversation keeps happening because it, it, the they keep the virus keeps vocalizing through other people. So it could be a very conscious, something very conscious that's spreading around. Now, Cameron says, is transhumanism popular enough that I would be let down not to have it in a space fantasy or sci-fi game? From my perspective, transhumanism is itself a pandemic. um, sure. Now, it depends on where you're coming from. Um, the people who are into transhumanism or against it that have nothing to do with like tabletop role playing, think of it differently than using it in a tabletop role playing setting. Um, you don't need to have transhumanism in your sci-fi or sci-fi fantasy, right? Not at all. It, it is just it's a niche element. It is. It's just about it's recontextualizing what it means to be human, and it also it's sometimes known as the save point games. Altered Carbon and Eclipse Phase being the most prevalent. There are others out there, and I can't think of their names, but I don't know whether it's Coriolis or Stars Without Number or something like that. I can't tell. I can't tell you if it has those things. But one of the arguments in tabletop games is the lethality of the game itself, and transhumanism makes it so that death isn't the final act. It's a stage at which great other stories can be told, but death is still a possibility, right? Because it's not a matter of whether your character can live or die, it's whether you can still keep gaming or not. you know um, a person, a character irradiated with radiation and their cortical stack is stuck on an asteroid orbiting some far off planet, might still be alive, right? They might be alive as a thumb drive. Their little thumb drive may still exist, but if it's an irradiated location that no one can get to, they're dead, effectively dead, right? I mean, they might be there for a thousand years to be resurrected later, but gaming wise, they're dead. The same goes for like going on a suicide mission. You go, PCs go on a mission, they get killed. Copies of themselves are somewhere else who never went on a mission. So now the new copies do not have the information that the other copies of themselves have. So it's also a lack of um, losing memory is another thing called in Eclipse Phase is called lack. And so you start playing with these other storytelling elements, as opposed to, oh, your character's dead or alive, right? It's a stage in the storytelling element that allows the stories to progress further, and some people or some gaming tables or even DMs have a hard time dealing with it. So I think that's the biggest problem in transhumanism. Although, heck, I think the other one would just be, you your body is like equipment. You can just switch in and out of it too. It's another thing. Dead Man says it could be like the video game Warframe, where the infested are created by infection by a pandemic type of disease that is spread through contact, and it was a major part of one of the expansions from a couple years ago. And isn't there something, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't there something like that in the Destiny games as well? Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something like that. Basic transhumanism is covered in body piercings. Yeah, being able to you know, um, the for me the best part of like resleeving your cortical stack, basically, your thumb drive that you can put into another body, is that you can have lots of different kinds of adventures, right? Hey, one time you're on Mars, another time you're in the deep oceans of the inner sea of Europa, and so now you have to be inside of some kind of aquatic styled body or morph that you're renting. You're in temporarily because of a particular mission, and then maybe in another one you're in a high gravity morph, and then another one you're in a some kind of solar morph that's allowed to exist in the void of space, and then you're in a combat morph and that kind of thing. So for players that love to, they get bored with their player characters very they're sorry for players that get bored with their characters very easily. This is a good thing. The bad thing is, of course, your players are going to come up with some really funky, surprising creative ideas to use, like, oh, I'm going to strap a bunch of explosives on my character and run into the bad guys and explode myself, because I know that I can just re-sleeve or get spun up from an old copy of my brain, and look, I solved the whole issue, done. You got to be careful of that. So that's the big thing. And it it gives you a lot to think about if you add it into regular science fiction, right? Whether you're playing like more of a hard sci-fi, or you're doing more science fantasy or something like that. You can insert those elements. Matter of fact, you can even insert those elements because the technology might be brand new or it might be outlawed. That kind of thing, right? Star Trek, they've outlawed. They're in the past history before the foundations of the Federation. They outlawed eugenics and that kind of thing. So yeah, there could be, this technology could be lost or held or inserted temporarily or something like that. Cameron says, would you think that someone in a sleeve could use psychic abilities or be subject to psychic diseases? Ooh, see, I love that kind of stuff. Um, Whether or not, as a game master, you allow someone to, say, re-sleeve themselves and they continue to have their psychic abilities, is based on your game and your setting. It could be limited to biological brains, maybe, or maybe there's something about having psychic awareness and psychic abilities that is, it's the unexplained science kind of thing, right? Like, we know it exists, we know how it works, but we don't know where it comes from. We don't. We have very hard ability to replicate it, but we know what it is. That's a possibility. Much like finding new energy sources or signals, and of course the Lovecraftian horror of psychic abilities is like a psychic parasite, or someone or something that has evolved to only living on like a psychic plane, um, a plane of existence that is nearly undetectable, doesn't correspond to a global internet, doesn't follow the pathways or even follow the laws of the speed of light, maybe even like inserting something like that in a game. I think that would be awesome. you know um, there, as was brought up on a previous week about talking about science fantasy, one of the great things about science fiction is throwing a fantasy element in there. Like, what's on the other side of a black hole? Who the hell knows? But let's talk about it, right? What There's a psychic entity that exists out there that our basic um, technology has no defense against, or very little defense against. What is it? How does it operate? There's a very old but good Netflix movie called Spectral, in which there is a high tech reason for these. They're like energy ghosts that are running around, or like I guess you call energy vampires or something, that are can pass through walls and solid objects, and the minute it touches you, it drains you of your life and drains it into their bodies. And the entire movie is them trying to figure out where they came from, what are they doing, how dangerous are they, what can stop them, what weapons can we use against them. And it never made it to the theaters, but Netflix picked it up, and it's called Spectral. And it's maybe the psychic entity was an experiment, or again, it could be something humanity has evolved to a particular location and been driven insane, or there's an alien presence and it's trying to communicate with us. Like, you come up with a number of ideas, and I like a psychic disease that has like mind control or starts erasing your memories, or an invasion of the body snatchers, even in this kind of high-tech world, may be a thing where they are able to the psychic residue of this alien species after the people have landed there. That's how they breed, in a way. Like, instead of, unlike us getting on interstellar ships and going through space, they just launch their psychic awareness into other galaxies, and when they get there, they invade other biological species and transform them, either mentally and or physically, taking over their technology or something. And maybe that's how they breed. Never know. Dead Man says found a did a little bit of a leap there. Found a great concept in the Eclipse phase Discord server. New super brand of a cleaner swarm. 70% more efficient. What people don't know is that each individual nano shine is piloted by a 60 times sped up indenture of the company's servers. Yeah, for those who don't know, there's a very common mundane item is basically a cleaner swarm. It's essentially a series of nanotech robots that keep you clean. They keep your armpits, your sweaty parts clean, making you keeping the dirt off of your body and things like that. And it's pretty mundane. It's very innocuous, right? People just have it, and that's how they live. But the dangerous is, like, what people don't know is, like, each nano shine, basically the thing that keeps you nice and clean and cuts your hair and makes sure you don't stink, is piloted by a 60x sped up indenture of the company's servers. An indenture is a digital information that is under the control of, like, corporations or governments or something like that. Yeah, Spectrum. That's a great. I thought the effects and things on the movie were great, and Netflix has so many damn things in there. I don't even know if Spectral's still on the server. It should be. I don't know why they would delete it, but yeah. You just made me think of it, and then I just forgot it. Okay. I once thought of this idea of people known as zeros, where, like, a pandemic doesn't necessarily need to be lethal, but it could be something destructive. So, for example, I thought of something that was a social media virus, where there are these class of people known as zeros, and for some reason, their digital identity becomes infected, destroying their footprint in a digital format, right? Like, there's nothing that happens to them physically, but all of your digital footprint ends up getting deleted. Now, in our current world, we're like, yeah, I get to delete all my stuff and I don't leave a digital footprint. How great is that? But in a society where your digital footprint is your identity, you can't buy things because you don't have access to your digital bank account. Oh, remember that digital bank account? It never existed. There's no digital connection to your history. You can't even download your brain, because over time, the cortical stack that the digital information in your brain starts to get deleted more and more. You're on a spacecraft, but when you left, you went into the spacecraft and you launched, but when you get there, there's no information that you even boarded the place. And they're like, but I did board it. Shouldn't I be on all the cameras? And you're not on any of the cameras. And having, like, this sub section of humanity Yeah, like Karen says, that sounds terrifying. Right. There's a subsection of humanity that has a zero digital footprint. Um, they they're they are deleted from cameras, and their, you know, when they have a job, their employment history gets deleted. You know, it starts getting corrupted, and maybe it spreads to other people, and nobody wants to be near you or have anything to do with you. So they don't include you in their circles to try to even attach you to their digital format, right? Um, of course, no one ever remembers your phone number because your phone number gets deleted. You know, those kind of things, and it sounds, first of all, as a player character, you're like, sweet, I get to be a super spy because there's no information left on me. But when you, even today, when you start to think about it, you have no birth certificate, no one, there's no, like, I know there's physical copies of things that exist places, but I'm saying the digital portion of it. You have no credit card. You only can have cash. You can't get a job. You you know, you can't get online and buy things or sign up for things, or you never receive notifications from anything ever because you have no digital footprint. Heck, the only thing you could probably use are like burner phones or something, because the minute you start trying to log into like social media servers, you know, hours, days, months later, they just end up getting corrupted, and it all it does is lock you out. And they're like, this account does not exist. Please type in your password. This password does not exist. Please type in your password. I just typed it in. It's been 5 minutes. Sorry, don't know who you are. You know, that would be pretty terrifying. I do agree with you, Cameron. But there's other things you could do with that as well. Like, um, there are like there's a condition called body dysmorphia, where when you try to re-sleeve into other bodies, psychologically you have a hard time adjusting, or maybe even being driven insane. Like, oh, I'm going to take my normal human body with the dreadlocks and an acid t-shirt, and I'm going to go and switch into like a Nova crab or a some kind of avian biomorph or something like that, and then be driven insane. Maybe there's a virus that causes that, so that more and more people end up getting like sick or being driven insane or having vertigo, or, you know, preventing resleeving in and of itself. Or there might be a pandemic of something that just infects nothing but cortical stacks. Like, there are in Eclipse phase and altered carbon. In altered carbon, there's like the digital human freight, the DHFs, that are people that have had their brains downloaded into those little chips, and but they're not in anywhere. They're like sitting in cold storage. They're in someone's pocket. They are being bought and sold on the black market. Maybe there's something that starts spreading, and it's not affecting the people who are walking around, but it's affecting the cortical stacks. It's affecting, and as each stack starts getting infected, they realize that, you know what, if I die, I can't be uploaded because of my backup brain. And maybe lots of people and their loved ones, they want to save their loved ones because they're in cold storage somewhere. Or a criminal organization has a bunch of these people on ice, using them as leverage. But when those people on leverage are being destroyed, they lose that capability. Same thing with governments or major corporations or something like that. Could be a thing that starts spreading around. So you have a lot of vectors to play with, at anything from, like, heck, a, a far future kids role playing game gets blended with a very powerful AI, and so all the creatures in the role playing game start being grown in vats and is spreading around, and that becomes the pandemic of some sort, right? Yeah. Deadman says there are pre-made adventures for Eclipse Phase that have characters that are infected, yet they want to inspect the infection more closely so that they can't just kill themselves. Yep. An infection that causes you to commit suicide, and or an infection that makes you want to do such a thing, driving you insane, or making you see things that aren't there, or hearing things, or opening up your communications to people you don't want your communications opened up to, and those digital switching, right? A pandemic that caused like a digital messes with the digital switchboard. So you're trying to access your internal computer and it doesn't work. You're trying to access external computer systems and the connections are funky. Um, as Deadman says, there are pre-made adventures where you literally wake up or somewhere and you're on a mission knowing that you're going to be infected, but you have to run around and solve or investigate what the infection is before the thing happens. I mean, I could imagine an individual scientific lab where there are virologists on the habitat of the lab specifically infecting themselves for the sole purpose of finding out what um, this super virus, super bug will do, right? You literally can have a firsthand experience of that and do that over and over and over again, which sounds pretty horrible to live through, but I'm sure there would be people who would do that. Um, some hacker creates a virus that's like a computer virus, and they implant it in themselves to discover how violent they can make this thing, and they do it over and over and over again. And when the PCs come upon it, they see not only do they see the prime, they also see all the mistakes of maybe a hacker that's, why are there 87 mutated bodies? Because he's done this 86 times to himself over and over again. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me for this Future Friday. I know, like Cameron kind of hints to me, may not be familiar with like transhumanism and stuff. So it's kind of one of my little favorites, and I like to introduce it to other people. I understand so many of you out there are playing like Altered Carbon, which has just been released. The second edition of Eclipse Phase and things like that, and maybe want something a little bit more hardcore, maybe might get into that. But I like to introduce other people who are not familiar with those concepts, and maybe even get to be creative by pulling on those concepts as well. So guys, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Next week, someone incorporated in the Discord for the ideas for me for DDJ about gods and goddesses. So maybe we might do that next week. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. I want all of you to have a great day. Be safe out there and have a great one. Thank you for watching.